Welcome to the Be Better broadcast, where we bring you tips and strategies and techniques that will help you to live an extraordinary life, both in your personal life as well as your professional life. And today, we're going to dive really into the second form there. We're going to be talking a lot about how you can build your brand, build your business, and build your connections through the power of professional networking. Now, I will say I've been in sales, as you all know, for many years, but networking has never been something that we were taught as its own skill or idea or philosophy. And that was a mistake because let me tell you, if I had understood the power of networking and really understood its capabilities early on in my sales career. I mean, we all do it naturally in a sense, right? But there are right ways of networking in a powerful way that allow you to build your brand and allow you to build incredible business connections at the same time. And today we're going to be talking to probably the number one expert that I can think about in the field of networking. He has so many different books on the topic. His name is Frank Agin. And today's topic specifically is professional networking, how to make meaningful connections. So without further ado, if you get any value from this episode, we don't run ads, we don't have sponsorships, simply share this episode with one person who also could use more meaningful relationships in their own business. So let's speak to the man himself, Mr. Frank Agin. And for those who don't know Frank is the president of Am Spirit Business Connection, an organization that empowers entrepreneurs, sales representatives, and professionals to become successful through networking. He's also the host of the Networking RX podcast, a weekly short form podcast with insights and interviews related to better business relationships. And he also narrates the Networking RX Minute, a micro podcast with daily ideas and inspiration. Finally, Frank is the author of many books, including Foundational Networking, Creating Know, Like, and Trust for a Lifetime of Extraordinary Success. Frank, it's a pleasure to have you on here, sir. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me. I love your intro, the canned intro, but just certainly talking about networking because I think we all kind of wake up to the power of networking. Some of us sooner than others. I wish I would have known as far back as in college. I hung out in a fraternity house with a lot of great guys, but there was a campus full of wonderful people that through Facebook I'm getting to know a little better. But man, I missed an opportunity. It's just I kick myself every time I think about that.
It's incredible, right? But you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's why this is going to be so powerful for everyone listening. Because let me tell you, and I think this is an important preface for everyone listening, I have never had more people say that I had to meet you, Frank, than you yourself. That's why in my mind, I see you as almost the godfather of networking. And that's an excellent tagline, by the way.
Okay.
But I remember Mike Verrett told me I should meet you. Simon Town told me I should meet you. Dr. Rob Bell was finally like, hey, you need to join his networking hub, which is something that we can mention too towards the end of this. And I was like, okay, I got to meet this guy. So I joined the hub. I found you. We had a great conversation. But really, what I liked most about you was it was a real conversation. Right. We all talk with people out there who promote themselves and talk about themselves. And you really made an effort to not just talk about you. You made an effort to make communication, right? You made an effort to have an actual human conversation. And that's why I was like, we've got to have Frank on the show to talk about networking, because networking, we think of BNI, we think of the Chamber of Commerce, we think of like the suit and tie, places you go and you exchange business cards, but really networking is so much more than that. So let me ask you this. When it comes to the history of networking, what is networking to you and how exactly did it get started?
Well, I think there's lots of definitions for networking. Mine is simply two or more people working towards their mutual benefit. And it's just something it's simple. It's something I've stuck with. It works for people in transition. It works for people who are in the business world. It works for people who are domestic engineers, people who are stay at home, because networking really is, it's about relationships and it's about us all working together. But, the history of networking, is really undocumented. No one in recent years, people have written a lot about it, but this is, I guess, let's just go back in time. I have a friend, he says, networking's as old as dirt. And I think it's not quite that old because dirt's pretty old. But there's a very from my understanding, it's a true story. I've looked it up in a number of different sources. But there's a famous anthropologist out there. Her name is Margaret Mead, and she was teaching a class, and one of the students asked her, "What was the first sign of human civilization?" And she thought about that question for a second, as just kind of there's no definitive answer. But people are thinking, okay, it was tools, it was weapons, it was the use of fire. Those were the signs of civilization. And her response was this: a healed femur. Now, the femur is the bone that connects the knee to the hip, for those who don't know. And without medical care, modern medical care, it takes about 6 weeks for that to heal. And she went on to explain that in the animal world, you don't see animals with healed femurs. Most animals have a femur. Some are smaller than others. Some depend on it more than others. But you don't see them with healed femurs, because when they break that femur, they cannot walk. They can't move. It's a death sentence. And they die, and the evidence of the broken femur is right there. But when they came across remains of humans who clearly had broken femurs that had healed, they were onto something. That somebody stayed behind. Somebody made a choice to, you know what? I'm going to sacrifice my time, my existence. And mind you, this was not the day of Amazon delivery and whatever. 24-hour convenience stores or anything like that. I mean, it was a hard life. And so to sacrifice your own self to care for another was probably a very unique decision in the animal world. And humans we're nothing more than animals. We're primates. And that was a choice that was made. And it was probably a choice that really helped us as a species, because imagine there are 4 people and one has a broken femur. Well, if you decide to leave that person behind, you go from 4 people who can work the hunt, do whatever, to 3. And that decreases your odds of success. So if you're willing to say, you know what, let's just take a pause here. We're going to take 6 weeks. We're going to sacrifice. We're going to figure this out. We're going to get this person back to health. Then, it's kind of like hockey. You get back to full strength in a matter of time, and you're much more successful when you're at full strength. And so over time, people who are willing to make this choice of staying behind, of these sacrifices, became successful, and then, their genes carried on. Ultimately, then we, went from this, and this is all part of the archaeological record. They're pretty certain of these things. We went from being this nomadic being to, starting communities of tribes and clans, or whatever you want to call them. And in those clans, you had to contribute, or you just couldn't be part of it. And if you couldn't be part of a tribe or a clan, it was really a death sentence. So that's where this whole notion of we need to work together to be successful came from. I'm not the godfather. I'm not the father of it. I'm just a willing participant. Well, I'm a student of it. I really,
yes.
I love learning about it. I love seeing it in action.
Yeah, and I think that we all tend to choose one thing, maybe a few things in our life to truly dive into and become really good at, and something that pulls us, like a superpower that we have that we've learned through the getting better at it. And I call you the godfather because, I mean, you've written more books on this topic than 99.99% of people who are on planet Earth. So there's something about this, many things about this, that you have a lot of value that you can bring. And I love the notion that it started all those years ago when we were simply helping each other to survive, so that we didn't lose people who could help us on the hunt, so that we didn't lose people who could help us with our number one instinct, which is the instinct to live, right? And I was going to ask you, because you mentioned how it's networking is the making progress towards a mutual benefit of the parties involved. And I was going to say, well, sacrificing your time to heal somebody's femur, help somebody with their femur, that seems like a lot more of a sacrifice for one person than the person who might be getting their femur replaced, right? That's literally saving that person's life. So this notion of sacrifice and giving more than you receive back, like, what role does this idea of reciprocity play in the way that you personally network with other people?
Well, whenever I have a conversation with somebody, I've kind of wired my brain. Or I try. I don't want to say I am. I try. I try to find ways to help other people. You know, and it's my daughter hit me with a saying years ago. She said, in every situation, your first thought shows you're human, but your second serves to define you. And she went on to explain. She said, it's not mine. I saw it on the internet somewhere, but I heard it from her, so I attribute it to her. But she's right. You know, in every situation, your first thought makes you human. Okay, so you're driving in traffic and somebody flips you off. Your first thought is to flip them off back. You're angry, right? That's a very violent gesture. That's your first thought. That's very human. But if you can stop and just kind of take a step back and get to that second thought and say, geez, I wonder what I might have done wrong, or what's they're having a bad day, that serves to define you as a better person. So when it comes to the whole notion of who we are, my first thought, your first thought, every human's first thought is, I need to survive. So I need to make a sale. I need to, you know, in the modern world, it's make a sale, or, you know, keep a job, or advance myself. That's the first thought. And most people I get on the phone with, most people I, you know, linked emotionally to my computer because of LinkedIn, you know, they're operating on that first thought. What can I get? Do you need cash? You need money? Do you need SEO? What do you need from me? I got something to sell, you know, need a watch, need a wallet, kind of a behavior, right? And I try to push through that and just think, okay, how can I help this person? Because Brandon, if you and I are not going to have a relationship long term, then it really doesn't matter that I pitch you on something, right? But if we're going to have a relationship long term, then why not lean into that second thought and try and figure out, okay, what are ways I can help Brandon? Because if it's going to go on, I'll have an opportunity to talk about myself. I'll be on your radar somehow, some way. And so we need to realize that we're not four people on the Serengeti plain hunting to survive. We're in a very modern world, and, you know, we don't have to pitch everybody. You know, the best way to do business is to have somebody actually just hand you a client saying, this person needs exactly what you offer. Of course, you're going to have to fill them in on price and how it all works and things like that. But you don't have to, you don't have to convince them that they have a need for what you've got. Those are the best places to be, and those are really done through relationship. And there's 7 billion people on the planet, Brandon. You can't work with them all, right? You know, you need maybe 100. That would be great. That would be a great existence. You know, so you get out there and network and try and get on people's radar, and you stay on people's radar by helping them. So it's all really it's all tied back to that moment where we just made that sacrifice, you know? And it's really kind of the same thing.
You know, when I was introduced to this world it was actually by Christine Smith, who you've had on your podcast.
Yeah.
She started introducing me to people, and I was so new to this game. I was like, well, I don't want to send other people who it doesn't make sense for them to connect. And she's like, don't think so much into it, right? There's always some way that we can help somebody else with our knowledge, our expertise. Once I started to be intentional about meeting new people and asking myself the question that you just said, well, how can I help this person? Even if we talked about this, right? That feeling of, you know, I don't have nearly as much that I can do for Frank, but I'm going to do my best, right? And as I continue to build new relationships, I'm always going to keep Frank in mind because he helped me. When I started being intentional about this world of networking, my circle now is very different than my circle 4 months ago. I'm surrounded by so many different people, and I've probably met 40 people in the past 4 months. And I have a strong circle who I surround myself with of maybe 5 people who I've actually never met in person, only one of them, which is Christine, but they're spread out everywhere. And we talk all the time. We support each other in business. Even though we're in separate businesses, there are several things that we can relate with. And I heard a quote, I'm not sure who the quote's from. It's that life supports those who support more of life. So the more you can do to give to other people, the more that's going to come back to you without the expectation of receiving. You do it to give, not to receive. But the receiving is almost like an automated function of that giving. And I remember in sales specifically, Frank, because I know you work with salespeople and sales teams as well when it comes to networking. And I wish you talked to our team years ago, because I was 18. I was in a mindset of how can I make more money on this sale? How can I get this person to leave with more things in their bag? And it was this very old fashioned style of selling that a lot of people still have from movies like The Wolf of Wall Street and all this thing. How can I get? And really what I started noticing was the people who were most successful were the people who just gave to their customer, the people who had customers who came back to them for years and years later,
Right.
because they always focus not on how can I get the most out of this, but how can I give the most so that they continue to come back over and over again.
No, it's absolutely true. Well, I have a lot of analogies. My kids roll their eyes at me. But one of the things I talk about with respect, I call it the sea of opportunity, right? I mean, imagine well, let's use candy as an example, right? What a lot of people do is, imagine a floor full of candy, all sorts of different kind of candy, and you have candy that you like, and you're going to go around and you're going to pick up your favorite candy. Let's say it's Snickers bars. Then you pick up all the Snickers bars and you leave the other candy behind because you don't have any use for it. And that's okay. It's a lot of work. You got to kind of work the whole floor to get candy bars. But a better approach is to pick up all the candy, pick up any of the candy, right? And I always tell people, listen, I don't like coconut. For whatever reason, I just don't like coconut. But if somebody hands me an Almond Joy bar, I'll take it because you might like coconut. You're right. And I'll give it to you. And that's really what we're doing. You talked about, the 4 or 5 people you have who don't really do what you do. Essentially, you're playing that game, right? You know what? I don't do what Simon does, or I don't do what Rob does. But when I come across an opportunity for them, I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to get it to them because I trust they're doing the same thing for me. And so when you start surrounding yourself with those sorts of people, it's a whole different level of opportunity because you have buckets of candy you really don't want that you can hand to people, and you know what? They've got buckets they can hand to you. And that's really what we're talking about here. And so often people, they're so, again, it's that first thought. They're so focused on, this is what I need, I can't be bothered by what you might need. And the trick is to be bothered by what other people need.
Wow. That's a powerful shift in mindset too. What does this person need and how can I help them with that? At the beginning, I ran into a lot and still do where someone needs something and I'm thinking, well, how can I help this person? I wish I knew somebody who did this specific thing. And now that I have met these people, I have different, like you said, different buckets, right? Different buckets of candy
Yeah.
that I can reach my hand into and introduce them. And I've now served as a resource indirectly as the middleman who's connected these two people who otherwise wouldn't have met each other. Now, let's talk about the person who is listening, who's saying, okay, this is like one of the first times I'm hearing about the power of networking. You've talked about networking being a science. What exactly did you mean by that? And how is networking a science that we can use?
Well, I really kind of touched on it in that original story about the broken femur, because what Mother Nature did is it selected the people who had a proclivity to helping others. If you helped others, you had a greater likelihood of surviving. And in today's day and age, it's still here. If you're willing to help others, you have a greater likelihood of succeeding, becoming more prosperous. But when I say it's a science, there are a lot of studies that are done out there. We are hardwired with certain reactions and just influences that happen that all kind of relate back to that moment where we're making a sacrifice to help one another. A number of studies. One that comes to mind, people kind of scoff at small talk all the time. Well, there was a study done over in Poland, and what they did was, it was at the University of Opel in Poland. What they did was they put a woman on the street and had her approach 100 other women, and 50 of them, they were all the women she approached were all walking by themselves, just to kind of reduce all the variables. It was a women approaching other women. But what they did is 50 of the women they went up to and just said, "Would you buy a candle from me?" And doing that, they sold 3 candles. With the other 50 women, and again, it's all random. With the other 50 women, they went up to the researcher went up to the woman researcher went up to and said, "How's your day?" And of course, the person will respond, I'm doing well or I'm not doing well. And then they would respond in kind with, oh, I'm glad you're having a great day, or I'm sorry you're not having a great day. Would you buy a candle from me? Well, in that situation, they sold 11.
Wow.
So it's like a fourfold increase. And so what they started talking about in this study was what was happening in the brain. And it's called heuristic processing. And there's lots of examples of heuristic processing, but essentially what heuristic processing is where the brain takes a shortcut. The most treacherous thing we do as humans, or did do as humans, or the most important decision we ever made related to other humans is, can I trust this person?
Mm.
And when we have small talk, we kind of bridge that really quickly. So small talk is one of those really important things that people just, again, they kind of scoff at it, like, I don't want to, I'll get on the phone with somebody in the right away, let's get right down to brass tacks. What do you got for me? It's like, yeah, this is going nowhere, right? I'm more likely to say, well, this is what I've got, and just end the call real quickly, because they're not interested in a relationship. They're interested in, do you have a deal for me? Or whatever it might be, or somebody coming at me. All you're interested in is selling at me. You're not interested in me. But that's again, that there's hardwiring in us. And there's all sorts of examples like that, how we shake hands. Having a good handshake is important. They've done studies on it.
Yeah.
Again, it's about knowing, liking, and trusting, and having a good handshake increases the likelihood that you're trusted. Finding things in common. There are studies out there showing when you find things that you have in common with people, you get into that small talk. What do you start talking about? It's Monday morning. Hey, did you see the game this weekend? What'd you think? Who's your team?
Yeah.
That have something in common. So those are all little things about, we think we're humans. We watch documentaries, we watch animals and how animals behave, and we think, oh, that's really odd. Look at humans. We are the same damn way. We operate the same way, how we flirt, how we do, we have our own little cadence to life. And there's a cadence to building relationships or networking. And we just need to understand it and follow it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that idea of heuristic processing, that's fascinating. You told me that study before of the girl who went out there and didn't make small talk and did, and the difference that it made. And I remember even when working with customers and clients, like not so much clients, but more so the short-term sales cycle customer who comes in and they just need something now. We call those customers who just get right down to it. They know what they want. They get it and they leave. We call them dynamos, right? And they're often the most difficult because there's no human connection there. Really, what this comes down to is just being a human, right? Not talking about the product, the service, but talking about each other. And I remember an old boss of mine had this saying of, the first 10 minutes that you're sitting with a customer or a client, you shouldn't be talking about the product or the service at all. It should be all about them. And it should be just a real conversation between two human beings. And being young, I heard that and I was like, oh my God, what are we going to talk about for 10 minutes?
Yeah.
But I started finding things to break the ice. Like, oh, that's a really nice watch. Or I like that suit, Frank. Where do you get the suit from? I wear suits all the time too, right? You just break the ice, or the car that they pull in with, the background that they have in their virtual setting if you're in a virtual meeting. Just talk about things that aren't related to the business first. Like, make that human connection as if you were running into each other at Walmart or the supermarket or whatever it might be.
Right.
I love that. I love that. So I'm curious, because you've been in this world of networking for a long time. What sparked your own curiosity in this topic that compelled you to really dedicate a large portion of your life to the study of networking?
Well, I guess my backstory is this. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I came to Columbus to go to law school at the Ohio State University. I have a law degree. I have an MBA. I was of the mind that you do well in school, you get lots of degrees, nothing will stop you. And I don't want to say that's dead wrong, but it's not right either. So I got a job as a tax consultant. It was a great job. It was great pay. There was always plenty of work, but I didn't want to do taxes for the rest of my life. And I decided to go into private practice. And a funny thing happened when I went into private practice, and funny thing was that nothing happened. I had no idea how to get clients. Through a through somebody I knew in law school, who had started her own firm, she suggested I get into a tips club or a leads group, like a BNI. Well, she didn't use that name, and BNI wasn't here, but there was an organization here that was very similar to BNI that I got involved in. And as soon as I showed up, because I'm of the mind, okay, you just tell people how smart you are. That's all. You know, I don't just have a law degree. I've got an MBA and I've got a CPA. I should get your business because I wow you. And the reality wasn't working that way. You know, people with half the credentials I was were beating me out. So I went to this meeting and it just totally floored me. It's like, you know, you can change your world entirely by helping other people. I'm like, yeah, that's so much easier. Because I could talk about you, Brandon, to other people and, yeah, he's great. He's got a podcast. It's super professional, blah, blah, blah. And I feel good about myself promoting you. And if you self-promote for 5 minutes, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got involved in that organization. And then at one point I had the opportunity to buy it out. So I did. And that's, you know, when I started down that path, there were a lot of people in the organization, that really need help, that, you know, are young, that are, it's interesting now. I've got people who are becoming members who grew up with my kids, who went to school with my kids, you know, and they're young and they're of the mind, I just need to get out there and, you know, just knock on as many doors as possible and it'll all work out. And yeah, it will. It's just a lot of doors. And there's a better way. You know, the other way is doesn't not work. There's just a better way.
What's the better way?
Well, relationships are a better way, right? I mean, rather than just, you know, being the mortgage lender and, you know, just pounding on every realtor you can find, you know, a couple dozen realtors that you can really build a relationship with. Just one example. You know, again, there's 7 billion people on the planet. You can't deal with them all. You can't know them all. You know the ones that make the most sense. You know, it's like you mentioned some great names. Rob Bell, amazing individual, right? Simon Towns, amazing individual. Who's the other? Well, Christine's obviously amazing individual. There was one other you had mentioned.
Mike Verrett,
Mike Verrett, amazing individual. None of whom do the same thing, right?
True.
But all kind of operate the same way. You know, and so, you know, you don't, you know, maybe you end up having 10 people like that in your life, you know, or maybe it's more than that you're kind of constantly going back and forth for, and they're running around picking up the candy you like most at the same time they're picking up the candy they like, and you're doing the same for them. That's the better way in my estimation. But it's hard to kind of explain that to somebody, especially when their boss is telling them, again, I don't want to say it's the wrong way, because it does work, but they're just telling them the harder way, you know, climb up this mountain, you know, hand over hand. And I'm like, you know what, if you follow that person, he'll introduce you to somebody who has steps that'll take you up around the backside of the mountain, right? It's just that simple.
Let me ask you this real quick. How are you intentional in the way that you network today? Because I can guarantee you have a lot of people who want to meet you, people who are referring people to you constantly. Do you make time for everybody that people introduce you to, or do you pick and choose the people at this point that you meet?
Yeah, I don't want to say I talk to everybody, but every contact has opportunity. You know, years ago, I got an opportunity to be an extra in the movie The Shawshank Redemption.
Wow.
And I talk about this in my book, Foundational Networking. I was referred to the opportunity by my parking lot attendant.
Whoa.
Who, she didn't know my name. She just knew I was an attorney amongst a sea of attorneys that stopped every day to say how she was doing. That's all. And she just stopped me one day. Her name was Twyla, and she just said, "Hey, how would you like to be an extra in a movie? They're shooting this movie up in, you know, north of where I'm at, and they need attorneys to be extras." Well, it turns out I got cast as a prisoner, but that's a whole nother, that's the irony of it all. But it's, you know, that's just, you know, how do you become intentional about it? You know, it's got to be important to you. It's just got to be important to you. And years ago, one of the things I started to do is I just started to document when I did things, just kind of keep a log. I called it the giving journal. and I never did it to keep score. I never, hey, Brandon, I see I've done a lot of things for you. You owe me, kind of a thing. I
Yeah.
just did it to kind of keep myself focused on giving to other people. And what I found was that journal, and it was nothing more than just a pad of paper. That journal called to me pretty much every day because I could look at it and see you haven't done anything for anybody. You haven't volunteered. You haven't made any introductions. You haven't given anybody your time. It's and so okay, I need to do something. I need to add to the journal, and eventually it just becomes habitual. That giving and trying to help other people, and the key to that is just trusting that it'll come back to you. And sometimes sometimes you have moments where it's like, oh, I got introduced to somebody yesterday. Do I really want to talk to this person?
Yeah.
It's another videographer. I've talked to 6 this week. I don't know, but you kind of go through that. Oh, maybe not. And then, okay, I'll give it 15 minutes. You just don't know. You don't know where that's going to go.
Yeah. I find myself in the same situation. I'll have an appointment on my calendar that I've made like 4 weeks ago, and it's been a long Zoom day. I'm thinking to myself, oh, another virtual meeting. And afterwards, I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm really happy that I met this person. Like I met this woman the other day, and she was just incredible. She was a coach like me, and we didn't talk about coaching at all. We didn't talk about business. I asked her how she was doing, and she responded in a very vulnerable way. And I was like, whoa, no one starts it off this way. She lost somebody close to them. And we just talked about that. We talked about loss. We talked about the impact it makes on what you want in life. We talked about goals. We talked about mission, where we're headed. And I got off that call and I was like, I never could have expected to speak with this person from San Francisco today, across the country, about their personal life that in a way touched me at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you still use that giving journal?
No, I don't. I actually put it into a book. There is a book out there called The Giving Journal. And, I mean, I think, I don't know what it sells for, $3. I mean, the notion.
That's one of your books?
Yeah, it's out there somewhere. Yeah. So if you look on my website, it's there. But I mean, the notion behind it is so simple. Originally I was going to put it together and have pages people could write in, but to me, that just seemed like a ripoff, right? Hey, here's a bunch of blank pieces of paper. You go to the dime store, wherever, go to the dollar store and get yourself a notebook and just start writing things in there, or scrap paper. I don't keep up on that journal anymore because it's a habit now. It's just what I do. It's just what I do. And, but to answer your question, do I talk to everybody? Yeah, I try to make time for everybody, but I guess at some point it gets a little overwhelming. But the people I like to have relationships with, and that's really what it is. Do I want to talk to somebody? If, geez, I want to tell you all about me. Yeah, that's great. If you want to get on somebody's radar, not just my radar, and I'm not being selfish about it, but there's got to be something in it for other people, right? Mm-hmm. Be part of my tribe. I think there's ways you can help me, but I think there's ways I can help you. Those are the people you want to associate with. Nobody wants someone in their life who, is totally needy. I'm totally needy. Let's talk. Maybe there's some things you can do for me. Yeah. Okay. I got lots of those. That's easy.
Yeah, I love that, because I've used this podcast as a way to talk to a lot of authors that I've wanted to have conversations with, because otherwise it's like, hey, do you want to hop on a Zoom call so I can learn about you? It's a lot different to say that than to say, hey, I've got a show and I'd love to talk about how you could be on the show to talk about your books, talk about your programs, what you're working on, because it gives me the opportunity to meet these experts. Like the other day, I don't know, have you ever read the book called Go for No?
No, I haven't.
It's an incredible sales book. It also relates much to networking. They go hand in hand, really. Sales is service. But I was able to interview the author of one of the most esteemed books in the world of sales. And I didn't even realize who it was really until a few weeks before. And I was like, whoa, I read this book when I was 19, like almost 10 years ago. Yeah. And I had the opportunity to have a conversation with someone who made such an impact on my sales career during the younger years. So you never know who you'll meet based on the people that you do meet at the same time.
Well, you don't know who they know. That's just, I mean, it's just like my parking lot attendant,
Yeah.
She's just a nice woman. She had a daughter and a granddaughter. I had no idea she was somehow connected to this movie. Well, I had no idea what the movie was. I just thought I was going to be in a movie.
Yeah.
It wasn't until it came out that I was just totally blown away. But yeah, I mean, there were a lot of people coming and going and never said anything to her. And you
Yes.
just don't know.
That's a great point, to really treat everyone in a beautiful way, right? No matter what
Yeah,
their role might be, just treat everyone with respect, treat everyone with love. I love
yeah.
that. So I'm all about practicality too, and I wanted to touch on your story and all that stuff, which we did. Let me ask you this now. People are listening and they're like, okay, I'm going to really start to be intentional about networking and giving. What are the common mistakes that you tend to see people make in networking, whether they're new to networking or they've been doing it for a while? What are the mistakes that you see?
Well, I think the biggest mistake is lacking patience. Okay, I did something. Where's my payback? You just you cannot keep score. You cannot keep score. You have to just do things and just trust that it'll come back to you. It's a lot of times it's not the person you've done something for that does something in return. It's the person who witnesses that, right? The people who see that you're helping other people, like, okay, he's a good person. I need to do business with that person. So it's just get out there and do things for others and just brand yourself as being a helpful person. Just trust it'll come back to you, because it will. Where I thought you were going with that was just, asking what my best piece of advice is, and I'll just give it. But what I always tell people when I'm on these calls and people ask, find something you're passionate about and volunteer. Volunteer your time, because when you're out volunteering, you're out there rubbing elbows with people who are passionate about the same thing, and you never ever have to talk about what you do. They'll figure it out. But those people immediately know, like, and trust you, and the people who see that you're doing something will come to know, like, and trust you. But that's really a great way to kind of kick off giving, finding out whatever it might be.
That's so powerful. Volunteer your time to something you're passionate about. There's so many different things you can do. I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah.
even in the local community itself. That's incredible. Let me ask you this, because I'm personally curious. Do you have a structure in mind when you meet someone new, or is it always you just you show up and you let what happens happen? Or do you have a structure in mind, like, I'm going to get to know them as the person first and then I'm going to talk to them about their business? Or is it just different for every single person?
I like to look at people's LinkedIn profile and just, again, you look for commonalities, right? What do you mainly have in common with this person? I grew up in the state of Michigan. I grew up about as far north in the state of Michigan as one can go. And so if I see somebody's from Michigan, that's always a great kicking off point for me. I love sports. When I talk to somebody in the UK or in Europe, I want to talk about soccer or football or the big tournament. And I'm amazed at all the people I run into that, I don't really care. It's like, really? Oh my God, I watch European soccer all the time. But I'm looking for those things. So I guess there is kind of a method to it. I don't, I'm not going in calculating, saying, okay, this is what I'm gonna try and get. And I'm not real salesy as it is. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about the opportunity that we have through AM Spirit. But that's where I'll leave it. This is what we've got. And if somebody's interested or somebody want to refer me, great.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about that for sure. Before we talk about that, I want to ask you this. We have a question from Nadeem here, who is someone who'd be incredible for you to meet as well if you haven't already. He asks, Frank, is it right to say that the way we communicate with others can make it or break it for us? And I mean communicating through any means, not only verbal or personal.
I think it's important. I mean, there's a saying out there: you only have one chance to make a first impression. I've got a good friend, fellow networker, Terry Bean. He talks about this in his book Connected, and he says, yeah, it's true. Technically, you only have one chance to make a first impression, but don't lose sight of all the subsequent impressions that you have. Right? You can screw up that first impression and resurrect it, or you can hit it out of the park with that first. But back to Nadeem's question. I think how we communicate with people is important. There's a wonderful book out there called Give and Take by Dr. Adam Grant. And he talks in there. It's a whole chapter on what he calls powerless communication. And what he shares actual research in there, but there are two ways of approaching a situation. Let me give you an example. Hey, Brandon, when you're in Nashville, you need to go to this restaurant. It is awesome. You'll love it. It'll be the best thing that'll ever happen to you. That's one way of communicating. Another way of communicating is, hey, if you make it to Nashville, a place I would recommend is going to this restaurant. I think you might like it. Now, those are basically saying the same thing, but they're saying them in two entirely different ways. One is kind of powerless, right? Hey, listen, I think you'll like it. Now, most people in sales will say, well, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be very assertive, and you'll love it, Brandon. It's to be the best thing that'll ever happen to you. The problem with that, talking that way, is I'm taking away your ability to have an opinion, right? You may go there and say, you know what? I don't really like that. How am I going to tell Frank I didn't like that without being offended? But if I say, hey, I think you might like it, you might come back to me and say, Frank, I really didn't appreciate that. Oh, okay. And so, back to Nadeem's question, yeah, how we communicate is really important, I think. But because you run into people all the time and he's the best person ever. Well, maybe not for me. Can I have my own opinion, please? So that's just one example of how we approach people, and letting people talk. You get into conversations and you formulate half an answer and they've got another question for you. It's like, okay, I guess you're just going to talk. I'll just let them talk. So yes, I think how we communicate is vitally important, verbally and non-verbally.
Wow. I love that idea of powerless and powerful statements, and how they're both, when used in the right context, can both be powerful in their own way. Yeah. I like that a lot. I'm always trying to be like, yeah, you're going to love this. I'm more of the powerful statement kind of guy, but I never thought about how that comes across if the person didn't like the thing that I recommended that they should go do. So I like that. I'm gonna start using that in my own life. Very cool. Nadeem, thanks for asking the question. My final question for you is, before I ask you about AmSpirit, the business connections and the opportunities there, at this chapter in your life, Frank, what is the impact, the positive impact that you wish to make on the world?
Well, I guess this will related. I certainly want to connect people. I want to help people. I have a monthly call with not-for-profits where I share the things I know and try and coach, get them to kind of buy into how they communicate. To help them with the same sorts of things. We all network. If you're in a relationship with somebody, you connected with that person through networking. Even if it's with somebody saying, hey, you need to get this app, right? There was networking involved. If you've got kids, you found a babysitter through networking. So networking is just part of what we do. But, where I want to help people. I want to help small businesses. I want to help small businesses become more successful, especially through the pandemic. A lot of people have made the choice. Listen, I'm going to go it on my own. I can't trust, I can't rely on corporate America to take care of me. I'm going to do my own thing. And so there are a lot of people out there. And I want to try and help people, certainly through AmSpirit, but however I can. I've got a podcast. I've got a couple podcasts. I've got information out there. And sometimes I tell people, this is true of finances. It's true of really anything. The difference between the haves and the have-nots is just a little bit of information, right? Just a little bit of, if 10 years ago or 8 years ago, you had known a little more about networking, just think how further ahead you would be.
I can't imagine.
I was 35 when I figured it out. My kids have been hearing this stuff since they were 6 years old. I would cart them around to meetings with me. We had our sitter fall through one summer and come with me, eat donuts, right? Come to a meeting, have donuts. But they've heard all these things, and I see them how they operate, how they build relationships. My oldest is 24. I mean, it's fascinating. They're so far ahead of where I was.
Wow.
But I want that to be open to other people. I think we can solve a lot of things in this world for ourselves and society in general, just by sharing of ideas and communicating and helping each other.
I agree wholeheartedly. Tell me a little bit about the opportunity with AmSpirit Business Connections.
Yeah, we're an organization where, I hate to do this, but we're very similar to BNI. Weekly meetings, one per category, uh, sharing referrals. The opportunity, certainly if you're out there and you want to get into an organization like that and you can't find a home, reach out to me, and I'm happy to try and either, if there's something close by, find you a chapter, we call them, or help you build one. But beyond that, there are opportunities to become part of the leadership team, become a director in the organization. And that's just, we call them area directors, to kind of get trained in, to learn how to start chapters and how to make chapters successful and how to participate and be successful in chapters. And there's no investment to that. But we also have what I'll call an ownership opportunity, a franchise opportunity that people can buy into. It's relatively inexpensive. Franchising is very regulated, so I don't want to get into too much. It's sold through a prospectus, but I'm happy to share that information out and, and engage in conversation on any aspect of our organization.
I love that. Guys, you can find more information on AmSpirit Business Connections, Frank's podcasts, his books, and all that at frankagin.com. Link is in the description to check those things out. What a conversation, Frank. Thank you so much for your time and for all the value that you've given us this morning.
Thank you.
You just heard from Frank Agin, who I'm going to coin as the godfather of networking. He's a humble man who has a lot of experience in this field, who studied for years and years in this field, who has many books, who has several podcasts on the topic itself. And again, you can find more about Frank at frankagin.com. Link is in the description. Networking has really made a profound impact in my life over the last 4 months alone. Intentional networking, I should say. And I know that it will do the same thing for you personally and for your business. But if you found any value from this episode, which I know you did, I know you took away one thing that one friend or family member or coworker could use, then share this episode with that friend. That's the price of entry for you being here. We thank you so much for watching. We thank you for your excellent questions in the live broadcast. And thank you for being here every single week. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.